I hadn't meant to leave the apartment that night. I told myself I'd just order takeout and crawl into bed again like I had for the past 2 weeks. But something about the silence in that place, it wasn't peaceful. It was oppressive, loud. Even every creak of the floor, every hum of the fridge just reminded me that I was alone. Truly alone. 3 weeks ago, I was still calling my mom every evening. 2 weeks ago, I was still unpacking boxes in a city I didn't want to move to. 1 week ago, I was still waking up and expecting to hear a familiar voice, his voice. Now it was just me. The loss of my mother, the end of a 6-year relationship, and this fresh start I never asked for had all collapsed into one long gray blur. That night, I needed air noise people. Something to remind me the world was still turning. I wandered into a little restaurant I'd passed a dozen times before but never thought to enter. The lights were warm, the windows fogged slightly from the heat inside. It looked safe, inviting. I told the hostess, just one, and she smiled politely. Too politely, like she didn't want to make eye contact for too long. They sat me near the window, tucked away but not hidden. The kind of spot that says, we didn't forget about you, but also you're not really part of the scene. I kept my coat on for a while, even though it was too warm just to feel like I had some kind of barrier between me and the room full of laughter. I looked around and realized I was the only person eating alone. I stared at the menu but didn't read a word. My stomach was tight, knotted with grief more than hunger. I ordered something safe, something I wouldn't have to think about. Then I picked up my phone and scrolled just to look busy. I opened texts. I'd already read emails I didn't care about. Anything to avoid sitting in the stillness of my own thoughts. But even with the hum of conversation around me, the clink of glasses and low music, I felt invisible. Like I was in the middle of 100 lives being lived, and mine had quietly slipped out the back door. The waiter approached my table with a kind of quiet ease, not overly cheerful, not distant either. His name tag read Daniel, and he looked young, maybe early 20s, with that tired but genuine smile people wear when they've been on their feet too long. He didn't ask if someone would be joining me. Just placed the menu down, gently poured a glass of water, and said, "Take your time, I'll be right back." That simple grace, no awkward questions, no fake small talk, was the first bit of comfort I'd felt all day. I nodded a silent thank you and watched him walk away, weaving through the tables like he belonged there, like everyone belongs somewhere. The restaurant was glowing in soft amber tones, little tea candles flickering on each table. Across the room, a couple toasted something, their eyes sparkling. At another table, a woman laughed so hard she had to cover her mouth with her napkin. None of it was directed at me, but it all pressed in around me like a reminder that I was on the outside of something warm. When Daniel returned, I ordered a simple pasta dish. He didn't ask if I wanted wine, and I was grateful for that. I wouldn't have known how to say no without my voice cracking. As I waited, I sat with my hands in my lap, unsure of what to do with them. The candle at my table danced gently in its glass holder, casting soft shadows on the linen. It made everything look more beautiful than it felt. I tried to pretend I was just out enjoying a quiet meal, but the lump in my throat kept rising with every bite of silence. Daniel passed by once more and gave a small nod. That's it. No words, just acknowledgement. And somehow that tiny gesture made me feel just a little more human. I was halfway through my pasta when I realized I hadn't tasted a single bite. The food was fine, great even, but it felt like chewing through memory. I took slow sips of water, watching the world move on without me, wondering how everyone else made happiness look so effortless. I told myself I wouldn't cry. Not in public. Not again. I wiped the corners of my mouth, took a deep breath, and motioned for the check. Daniel nodded and disappeared toward the back. I reached for my coat, ready to leave before the weight of the evening settled even deeper into my chest. But when Daniel returned, he wasn't holding the check. Instead, he placed a small white plate in front of me. On it sat a delicate slice of chocolate cake drizzled with raspberry sauce and dusted with powdered sugar. Next to the dessert was a folded square of paper, creased neatly in half. "I didn't order this," I said, my voice catching. Daniel gave a soft smile and lowered his voice. "It was sent to you by someone else in the restaurant. They asked me to bring it over with the note." I blinked, confused. Who? He hesitated. They asked to stay anonymous. I looked around the room instinctively, scanning faces, trying to catch a glance in my direction, a smile, a sign. But no one looked my way. Everyone was still lost in their own conversations, laughter, wine. My heart began to race, a strange warmth, stirring beneath the cold shell I'd been carrying all week. With shaking fingers, I unfolded the note. It wasn't long, just a few lines written in clean, looping handwriting. "I've been where you are, alone lost. Feeling like no one sees you, but I see you. And I want you to know your presence matters. You're stronger than you realize. Keep going." I stared at the words, unsure if I was imagining them. They felt impossibly precise, like they had been written for me, about me, like someone had reached into my chest and named what I hadn't been able to say out loud. My eyes welled up before I could stop them. I quickly lowered my gaze, blinking fast, not wanting anyone to notice the tears pooling against my lashes. But in that moment, I didn't feel broken. I felt seen. I reread the note once, twice. Then again, it was unsigned, no clue as to who had written it. And yet somehow that made it more powerful. This wasn't pity. This wasn't charity. It was empathy. Quiet, anonymous, and real. Daniel didn't say anything else, just gave me a knowing nod and walked away like he understood this wasn't a moment to interrupt. I picked up the fork, took a small bite of the cake. It was rich, soft, a little bittersweet, like the note itself. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel entirely alone. The note rested beside my plate like it carried more weight than anything else in the room. I must have read it a dozen times by then, each time the words settling deeper into me like soft rain soaking through cracked earth. "I see you." Those three words echoed louder than the chatter around me, louder than the music playing overhead. In a world where I'd started to feel invisible, where even mirrors didn't quite reflect the person I used to be, someone had noticed. Someone had seen me, not just a woman eating alone, not just a face lost in a crowd, but me in my pain, in my quiet, in my in-between. I kept looking up, hoping for a sign. Not a smile, a small wave. Anything. But there was no hint. Whoever they were, they had chosen to remain hidden. That anonymity should have made it feel impersonal, but instead it made the gesture feel pure. This wasn't about recognition or praise. It wasn't a performance. It was kindness dropped gently into my life when I needed it most. A stranger who perhaps once sat where I sat had decided not to walk past my sorrow, but to reach back and say, "I know, and I'm here in spirit." And just like that, something in me began to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly, like how snow starts to melt under the first touch of spring. I didn't suddenly feel whole. I didn't forget the grief or the emptiness, but I felt less buried by it, less ashamed of carrying it. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket like a secret I needed to protect. It felt like a lighthouse I might come back to on harder nights. Proof that I wasn't as invisible as I thought I was. When Daniel brought the check, I finally found my voice again. "Did they say anything else?" I asked quietly. He shook his head gently. "No, just that they'd been there before, and that you looked like someone who needed to be reminded they mattered." I nodded, swallowing back another wave of emotion. The bill was already paid. Another surprise, I left a generous tip and a short note for Daniel, just 2 words. "Thank you." He gave a knowing smile as I stood to leave. Outside, the night air was crisp and clean. The city buzzed around me the way it always did, but for the first time in weeks, it didn't feel so harsh. I walked home slowly, one hand in my coat pocket, fingers curled around the folded paper, and with every step, one truth echoed quietly inside me. Someone saw me, and somehow that made it easier to see myself again. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about the note. It had followed me into my dreams, gently tugging at the edges of my sleep like a whisper I couldn't quite catch. I found myself replaying every moment from the night before Daniel's voice, the timing of the dessert, the way no one had looked in my direction. I scanned faces in my memory, wondering if one of them had held the secret. Was it the older woman at the corner table? The young man near the bar scribbling in a notebook? The couple that left just before the dessert arrived? I wasn't expecting to find them. Not really, but I went back to the restaurant anyway. 2 nights later, I walked in, this time with less hesitation. Daniel recognized me immediately. He gave a soft smile and said, "Back so soon." I nodded. I had a question about the other night. He didn't need me to say more. He looked around, made sure no one was within earshot, then leaned in slightly. I promised I wouldn't give anything away. They were very clear about staying anonymous. I smiled faintly. I figured I just wanted to say thank you, even if I never find out who they were. Daniel studied me for a moment, then said something I didn't expect. "Maybe you're not supposed to know who it was. Maybe you're just supposed to remember how it felt." Those words sat with me longer than I thought they would. Maybe the truth wasn't in the identity of the person, but in what their act had unlocked in me. Because something had shifted. I noticed it the next time I walked down the street. I held my head a little higher. I smiled at a stranger holding a door open. I made eye contact with the barista instead of just mumbling my order. Tiny things. But when your heart has been sitting underwater for months, even a single breath can feel like resurrection. I started carrying the note with me. Not because I needed constant reassurance, but because it reminded me that even in the dark, someone had chosen to shine a light. Someone had reached out not to fix me, but to let me know I wasn't beyond being seen, being cared for, being understood. One evening, I sat on a park bench watching a woman across from me wipe her eyes with the sleeve of her sweater. She was holding a takeout container and looked like she was trying not to fall apart. I hesitated, but only for a second. Then I got up, walked to the nearest cafe, and ordered a small slice of lemon cake. I returned to the bench, placed it gently beside her without a word, and walked away. No note, no explanation, just a quiet gesture. Maybe she wouldn't understand it right away. Maybe she'd throw it away, confused. Or maybe, just maybe, it would reach her the same way that chocolate cake and folded paper had reached me. Because sometimes healing starts not with answers, but with connection, with a reminder that we are seen even by strangers, and that even the smallest act of kindness can stir a heart that thought it had gone silent forever. Weeks passed, but I never forgot that night. The note, the cake, the feeling of being noticed when I was certain I'd faded into the background of the world. It was a single moment, brief and anonymous, but it had created a ripple that wouldn't stop moving through me. I began to see people differently, not as strangers but as stories, each carrying their own hidden heartaches, quiet victories, private storms. I stopped assuming the woman sighing behind me in line was just impatient. I wondered if she had just come from a hospital visit. I stopped seeing the man staring blankly out the train window as someone lost in thought. Maybe he was grieving. Maybe, like me, he was waiting for some invisible hand to remind him he still mattered. And so every now and then, I started acting on those thoughts. Small things, a cup of coffee paid for, a flower left anonymously on a desk, a book mailed without a return address with a sticky note that said, "This helped me. Maybe it'll help you." Nothing grand, nothing loud. Just echoes of what had once been done for me. And each time I gave something away, I felt more whole. Not because I was better now, but because I had become a part of something larger than my pain, a part of a healing circle that had quietly begun the night a waiter set down a plate I hadn't asked for. Sometimes I wondered if the person who wrote the note had any idea what they started. I hoped they did. I hoped that somewhere out there they kept doing what they did that night, seeing the invisible lighting candles in other people's dark rooms. But even if I never found them, even if they never knew the full weight of their gesture, it didn't matter because what they gave me couldn't be undone. They reminded me that healing doesn't always come in one grand, dramatic moment. Sometimes it starts with dessert and a folded piece of paper. Sometimes it begins when someone decides not to walk away from your pain, even if they don't know your name. And now I find myself watching the world a little closer. I listen more carefully to what people don't say. I look for the ones who sit alone and try to leave behind something warmer than silence. Because healing, I've learned, isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you carry forward, something you pass along without needing to be thanked or recognized. It's a circle, and the beauty of a circle is that it has no beginning, no end, just a continuous return of kindness presence, and the quiet reminder, you're not alone, you matter, you're seen.